The bill lay between the water glasses like a dare. Under the rooftop lights, with the city spread in neat squares below, Lena saw the numbers blur. The 3-digit total for plates she had barely touched. She had $4 folded into her cardholder, 2 bills softened by the heat of summer laundry, 2 crisp ones tipped to her by a grateful guest earlier in the afternoon. They were supposed to be bus fare, a small breakfast, proof she could stand in the glow of other people's extravagance and still belong. "We don't bow. We don't break," her mother always said in a tone that could polish steel. The man, across from her, Colin, laughed softly and leaned back, chair on 2 legs, beer glossed, attention already swiveling to a blonde woman at the bar. "You'll get this, right?" he said, casual as a weather report. He stood while the bill was still face down. "You're lucky to have met me. I opened your world." At the next table, a young man in a black suit hesitated, watching the humiliation flower quietly. He had the air of someone used to seeing answers in columns and reports, not faces. He set down his glass and did not look away. The server hovered. The bill did not blink. The city breathed. Lena Morales lived in a small apartment that held the smell of lemon cleaner and her mother's soap. Some nights she woke with a cough from the dryer lint in the building's basement, a cough her mother hid behind her wrist. On her wall hung a calendar with work shifts circled in red and tuition due dates in blue. She measured life in laundry cycles and bus schedules. Accounting textbooks sat on her table, onion skin pages flagged with sticky notes. Balance sheets made sense. People were more expensive. Her mother, Alma, worked as a maid at the Hale Hotel downtown. She left before dawn with a thermos and a promise. Once Lena finished school, she would not have to lower her head for anyone. They had a mantra, hand-me-down courage, spoken in a mirror. "We don't bow. We don't break." Across town, in a penthouse that held the smell of white lilies and a view of every kind of glitter, Adrian Hale lived inside the shape of expectations. The Hale Urban Group owned hotels that were vertical cities, glass and stone, with names etched into revolving doors. His father, Victor Hale, believed in the weight of legacy and the silence of power. "We carry our name like a shield," he told his son at breakfast, a plate of broiled grapefruit between them. Adrian was 26. He had degrees in finance and urban planning, the kind of resume that looked durable in bullet points. His days were tulip charts and occupancy rates, supply forecasts, and how to keep that gleam of marble from showing fingerprints. He walked through lobby spaces that were designed to be felt but not remembered, and he thought of how very hard people worked to make it look effortless. Sometimes, when the elevators sighed open on the service floor, he caught a different soundtrack, the squeak of carts, voices in Spanish and Tagalog, and the thick, proud music of Brooklyn and Queens. He could hear laughter in there and fatigue. His father's company called it operations. He had begun to call it the engine. The blind date had been a favor. Elena from accounting class had clasped Lena's hands and proclaimed Colin a gentleman, a start-up guy, but not unbearable. It had felt like a challenge to believe that kindness could come with a clean edge. "Meet him at the Lantern," Eleanor had said, sliding a lipstick across a napkin as if passing a baton. The Lantern was on the roof of the Hale Hotel. Lena had seen its ceiling of hanging bulbs from the service hallway on her way to meet her mother for a quick hug between room turns. She had never crossed the velvet rope. She wore her one good dress. It had cost 2 weeks of tips and mending. In the mirror, she saw a girl with steady eyes and shoulders that remembered their grandmother's posture, a line of women who had learned to stand straight in rooms designed to make you small. She slipped $4 into her cardholder, stiff and thin, and told herself she would be careful, that she would return with both dignity and bus fare. Adrian sat at the Lantern that night because he had been told to be seen there. "Visible, accessible, a Hale among our guests," his father had said, without actually touching anything real. He was to shake hands, nod at the right people, and keep the machinery of image humming. He had a seat with a clean view of tables and a corner where staff collected silverware with the discipline of a dance. He wasn't supposed to notice the details. He noticed. Colin arrived 10 minutes late, phone still in his hand, as he talked about his app, his investors, the way he would disrupt the industry from a co-working desk with kombucha taps. He waved at the menu like it was a personal assistant and ordered meals that read like an apology for minimalism. Dishes with words that tasted like secrecy, foam, reduction essence. Lena asked for water, a small plate, the salad that was mostly light. She laughed at the right moments. She asked him questions that made him feel expansive. When the server poured the wine, Colin lifted his glass and said, "To seeing how the other half lives," she smiled, because she understood that he meant it as a joke and because for a moment she had wanted to feel ordinary. When the dessert menus came folded like quiet letters and the skyline pressed its face against the glass, Colin said, "I forgot my wallet." "Can you believe?" He was already standing. "I'll be back." He didn't come back. The server floated over with a new gravity. "Did he leave?" she asked, wary of managers and policies and the way a missing person becomes a problem. The bill arrived like a verdict. Lena felt heat in her face and cold under her fingernails. Her $4 might as well have been 4 stones. She lifted the bill and saw the arithmetic of humiliation. "That's outrageous," she said. He left. She heard the small plea in her voice and despised it. She stood. The manager came like a shadow with a smile. "I'm sure we can sort this out," he said, and his eyes moved to the security at the door, the maitre d', the place where embarrassment becomes a spectacle. From his table, Adrian watched the choreography of power tighten around her. It was subtle, meant to be unremarked. The slight incline of the manager's head to the server, the gentle narrowing of the staff's space around Lena, the tightening of the air. He saw in her face a stubbornness that had no room to breathe. He did a quick inventory, the way Colin had entered like he owned the light. The order of dishes a person never intended to pay for. The confidence of those who never expected anyone to say no. He also saw the girl's cardholder, thin as a breath. He recognized the scene because he knew the policies by heart. He also knew something else, the distress of the people who carry other people's messes. He stood. "Excuse me," he said to the server in the kind of voice that rides above a room without raising volume. "There's been a mix-up." Lena saw a man in a black suit with a clean, unremarkable face and expensive restraint. He did not look at her when he spoke to the manager. He kept his gaze down and his tone politely bored, the way a person with authority builds a bridge over a burning place. "I'm with her," Adrian said, which wasn't true. "Our office booked this reservation. The charges go to Hale Urban Group. We're comping this as an operations test." He placed his black card on the bill and wrote a number on the tip, line that made the server's shoulders drop and color return to her face. He slid the cardholder back toward the manager with a nod that said, "This is over," in a language of money and institutional assurance. The manager blinked. He recognized Adrian, or he recognized the shape of a person who never walked through staff doors unannounced. Either way, he acquiesced with relief. "Of course, Mr. Hale, my apologies." Lena did not like being a word in someone else's sentence, but she also felt the room release her, and the dizziness of that made everything quieter. She did not say thank you immediately. Gratitude felt like the wrong currency. She lifted her chin because that was what her mother would have done. Adrian turned to her then. "You don't owe them a story," he said softly. "Take your time." His voice was nothing like Colin's. It did not brag. It did not assume. It simply made space. She wanted to leave. She wanted to run the 4 blocks to the bus stop and fold herself into the fabric of the city. But the elevator would be slow, and she would have to cross a lobby that was all white stone and eyes. The man who had rescued her, if that was the right word, stood as if ready to walk her out without calling attention. There was tact in his posture. It irritated her. "Do you always pay off strangers?" she asked, tart to cover the shiver under her skin. "Only when our policies would make it uglier," he said. "And when I can." "Because you can," she repeated, the edge of it a blade she sharpened in her mouth. He did not flinch. They reached the elevator. The doors opened like a secret. Inside, it was them and their reflections. Lena saw herself next to a man who had never had to count coins in a grocery checkout line. She pressed the lobby button like it meant something. The doors closed, and he said, "I'm Adrian." She did not answer with her name. Names were power. The elevator sliced through floors. On the mezzanine, just before the lobby, a man with hair the color of money stepped in, flanked by two executives and the scent of a tailored day. He looked at Adrian with a father's smooth appraisal and at Lena with the vacuum of someone trained not to see. "Son," Victor Hale said, and even the elevator straightened. "Working late?" "For the company," Adrian said. He gestured to Lena without touching her. "We had a billing issue. I took care of it." Victor's glance was brief but surgical. "And who is we?" "The guest your office invited." His gaze stepped around Lena as if she were furniture. "I am a person, sir," Lena said quietly. Her voice did not shake. "And a worker in one of your buildings." "Not this one." "The other." Victor's smile had the patience of marble. "Everyone is a person," he said. "You're fortunate my son was there to assist." "Fortune is a matter of access," Lena replied before she could stop herself. "You have all the doors." The elevator stopped. The lobby glowed. Victor stepped out, as if the world had stepped out first. He turned, a lawyer's precision in his voice. "Adrian, a word?" Adrian followed into the hinge of the lobby, where the smell of flowers met the smell of floor polish. Victor's words were cool. "You do not draw attention to operational mishaps. You certainly don't publicize our generosity. If something like this happens, you ask the manager to escort the individual discreetly. You don't create a scene that suggests we did something wrong." Adrian felt that old smallness return, the cage whose bars were the shape of his last name. He thought of the server's face. Creating a scene, he said, would have been letting it go on, and bringing a staff problem into our space is not. Victor's smile had no temperature. "We are here to entertain guests, not to rescue strays from their choices." Adrian thought of the $4. He thought of how a bus cannot wait for a lecture. In the elevator, Lena pressed her palm against the bronze rail and repeated in her head, "We don't bow. We don't break." Then against herself, she lingered in the lobby by the doors, listening to power explain itself, absorbing it like a blueprint she could later redraw. Outside, the air was soft with the kind of warmth that holds scent, street food, taxi exhaust, an edge of rain that had not yet arrived. Lena walked with quick steps until she realized he was beside her. "I didn't ask you to follow," she said without stopping. "I know," he said. "I wanted to apologize." She stopped then because the word was unexpected. "For your father?" "For the way this place was designed to make you feel small," he said. "We built it that way. I work within it. I see it." Something in her unclenched at the admission, then tightened again. "Seeing something and changing it are different." "I know," he said. "I can do one. I'm trying to learn the other." She could have left it there. But he had shifted the language inside the humiliation, and it changed the night's shape. "I'm Lena," she said. "This has been a long day." There was a bus stop visible like a promise. She held up the cardholder. $4. "That was the plan. May I—" He started, then stopped, adjusting the pitch of what he was offering. "Do you want a ride to the bus stop?" "It is a long walk in heels." He said it simply, no flourish. She nodded once. They walked to the corner in silence. 2 days later, Lena's mother coughed through a double shift and fell asleep at the kitchen table, head cradled in her arms. On the counter sat a letter with a logo and a surprise, an invitation to a worker advisory listening session at the Hale Hotel with refreshments and a stipend for your time. It was signed by A. Hale, Community Initiatives. Lena stared at the letter. She stared until the words shifted from suspicion to possibility. The stipend would cover a week of bus fare. Her mother would not go. She would send Lena. At the hotel's small meeting room, someone had taken time to make it smell like oranges. There were chairs in a circle and a microphone no one wanted. Housekeepers sat with their hands folded. Bellman sat upright, back straight with history. The HR manager opened with a smile that tried to translate policy into care. Then Adrian walked in carrying a stack of paper cups. "I want to listen," he said, and he left the microphone off. Lena watched him seat himself, not at the head of the circle, but among the chairs. She knew meetings like this could be theatre. She also knew that sometimes theatre practiced people for the real thing, one by one. Staff spoke about overtime hours shaved off in the scheduling software. Broken vacuums that cost them minutes that became warnings. They spoke about the pride of making beds you could bounce a coin on, of leaving chocolates on pillows, of knowing a guest had had a bad day and folding a towel. Into a swan as salve, Adrian took notes in a small notebook that did not look like it belonged to a CEO. He asked questions about how long a cart traveled from supply closet to the far wing. Lena could see his mind mapping routes, bottlenecks, seeing the invisible engine as more than a metaphor. When it was her turn, she told them about the lantern. She used no names. She said, "Humiliation is not a policy, but sometimes it feels like one." She added, quieter, "We don't bow. We don't break." Adrian looked up at that. "Who taught you that?" "My mother," she said. "Who learned it scrubbing floors in a school in another country?" He nodded. "My mother taught me the opposite," he said without self-pity. "Don't give anyone a reason to look down on you," she said. "Which means you spend your life trying to be taller than everyone. It is exhausting." After the meeting, there was coffee and paper cups and a bulletin board that asked for volunteers for a pilot oversight committee to evaluate timekeeping integrity. Lena signed up because she knew how to read a ledger, and because the word integrity had a sound she liked. Adrian caught her eye as she put down the pen. "There's a lot I don't know," he said. "Would you be willing to teach me? Not as a favor, as a paid consultant, through the foundation, so there's a paper trail that keeps us accountable to you." Lena's first instinct was to refuse out of pride. Her second was to see the shape of change. She looked at the stipend line again. She looked at his notebook. "I will," she said. "But if this is performative, I walk." "Agreed," he said. They began to meet in the hotel's back-of-house conference room once a week, in the pale light of 9 a.m., when staff rotated from day to afternoon shift. Lena brought spreadsheets. She brought stories to lay between cells like threads. "You cannot understand the week if you look only at the day," she told him. "People stretch. They borrow minutes from tomorrow to finish today. Your software shuts the door." He brought floor plans and labor models. "We move carts like chess pieces," he said. "We pretend people are interchangeable. It makes us feel efficient." They walked the service corridors together, shoes echoing. He pushed a cart to feel the weight. She timed the distance between elevators and the far end of the hall. In the supply closet, she showed him the broken wheel on the second vacuum that should have been replaced 6 months ago. "This is what turns pride into punishment," she said. He took a photo and sent it to purchasing with the simplest subject line, "Replace today." She blogged the process on an internal portal they made to bypass PR, Invisible Engine. He wrote, sometimes in the late hours, about the gilded cage. He did not always name his father, but the shape of him bent the paragraphs. "We built a cage," he wrote one morning, letting the word finally be honest. "It gleams. People are invited in and asked to be grateful. Inside, all the choices look like ourselves." Lena wrote back in the comments, anonymous to the wider staff, but not to him. "We carry the engine. It is messy, it leaks. It smells like bleach and coffee. But it runs, and it is the only thing that brings us home." They stopped shy of friendship. Boundaries are also tools. But they began to recognize something rare in the other, moral appetite. The kind that does not announce itself, but returns, hungry, to the same questions. "If you're still here," the narrator might say now to the listener, "you know the moment before the mirror turns. If your heart leaned in when you heard the word integrity, stay with me. We're not done." The board meeting was scheduled for a Wednesday in late September under the cold air of a chandelier. The agenda had 10 items, and the 7th was Operational Efficiency Update. It did not mention timekeeping or wages. That would be too human for an agenda that liked euphemisms. Adrian asked for the floor and walked to the front with his small notebook instead of a slide deck. He had a press clipping in his pocket, a story about a hotel in another city settling with housekeepers for unpaid work. He put it there like a talisman of consequence. His father's eyes were polished stones. "Make it quick," Victor said. "We have numbers." "I have numbers," Adrian said. "I also have names." He spoke for 3 minutes. He spoke about minutes shaved and schedules overstuffed. He spoke about a vacuum replaced and a vacuum still broken in another property. He spoke about the actual distance between a supply closet and room 337, timing it at 3 minutes and 40 seconds each way, multiplied by the number of rooms per shift. "That is 37 minutes a day," he said. Unpaid, when the software clocks people out at the hallway, not the door, a board member shifted. Another checked their phone. Adrian held the room by being the rare thing. A hail using the word unpaid, like a bell. "I propose," he said, "we adopt real audits, independent. We pay back wages where we owe them. We stop treating the engine as expendable. We build policy around dignity instead of around optics." Victor laughed once. It sounded like crystal fracturing. "And do we hand the keys to our reputation to whichever activist wants a headline?" "We hand it to the truth," Adrian said, quieter. Victor turned to the board. "You all know my son is idealistic," he said, with the indulgence of a man introducing a child's drawing. "He reads blogs and thinks he understands factories. We build hotels. We build jobs. We are not thieves." Then he did something theatrical. He gestured to the door. "If this is such a moral emergency, bring one of your engines in. Let us hear what you hear." Adrian looked at the board. He looked at the assistant by the door, who wore worry like perfume. "I invited someone," he said. "Not as theater, as witness." The door opened. Lena stepped in. She had worn her work clothes because she was going back to her other job after this. The fabric was clean, ironed to a crease her mother would have approved. She walked to the front without apology and set a single sheet of paper on the table. It was a list of names and numbers, hours and minutes, anonymous but real. She did not look at Victor first. She looked at the board. "I am not here to be grateful," she said. "I am here to tell you what you already know if you have ever pushed a cart." And then she did something that moved the room. She made them count with her. 3 minutes and 40 seconds, she said, and she had them look at a clock. They stared at the second-hand chewing time, and the silence grew heavy with the weight of non-productive time, the kind capitalism hates to acknowledge. When the hand hit the mark, she said, "That is how long it takes to walk to the closet and back. You pay for none of it. We are told to be fast. We are told to smile. We are told we are family." She lifted her chin. "Family is not a time-keeping setting," Victor interrupted. "And what of personal responsibility? What of people who take smoke breaks and call them work?" Lena did not flinch. "What of executives who call their lunches strategy and their taxis meetings? What of software designed to round down because it is profitable?" Her voice stayed even. "We don't bow. We don't break." The room held its breath. The mantra sounded different here, in the mouth of a worker, standing in the chandelier's cold air. It sounded like a line in a constitution. Adrian watched his father calculate outcomes, PR risk, shareholder patience, the messiness of admitting wrong. He also watched the board look from father to son and back, seeing in them two ways to carry a name, like a shield or like a promise. The head of the audit committee, a woman with hair pulled back and a law degree etched into her posture, cleared her throat. "I move," she said slowly. "We commission an independent review of our timekeeping and labor practices and authorize back pay where due." There was murmured seconding. Victor's jaw tightened, but even he knew when a tide had come in without asking. He turned to Lena, then in a brief flicker of observation that might have been the beginning of seeing. "What do you want?" he asked, an odd question in a room shaped to give. "Policy that keeps promises when no one is watching," she said. "A chair in the room where decisions are made, with someone like me sitting in it." And my mother and others like her paid for what they are owed. Victor looked at Adrian. And you? He asked. Adrian answered, the way you talk when you stop speaking for your father and start speaking for yourself. I want us to be the company we say we are in brochures. The motion passed. The room exhaled. The chandelier kept being cold, but something living had altered the temperature. Months later, on an evening with a tender wind, Lena stood again outside the lantern. It was not a date night or a night for humiliation. It was a small ceremony. The hotel had put up a plaque, not grand, just a brass square near the staff elevator, that read, "Time is work. Dignity is policy." It embarrassed her, but it also protected the line from being forgotten. She had been hired part-time by the foundation as a worker advisor. The title fit like a jacket, with room to lift your arms. Her mother coughed less since the union settled with the hotel for back pay and better schedules. There were new vacuums now, with wheels that didn't wobble. In the break room, someone had painted a mural of a clock, with hands made of brooms and pens. She held in her cardholder $4 again. She had kept them by choice this time, folded and worn. The city had taught her that the number could be a talisman, not a scarcity. She stepped into the lobby and paused at the spot where she had once listened to a father caution a son not to make things ugly by seeing them. She looked up at the lights and saw not a cage but a map. Adrian was there at the edge, as always not in the center, but where logistics live. He wore a suit, but his notebook stuck awkwardly from a pocket. He nodded when he saw her and did not move into her space. He had learned the dignity of distance. "Do you remember the bill?" Lena asked, half-smile, not to needle, but to close a circle. "I think about it when I see the server's tips on the audit report," he said. "I remember the look on your face when you said fortune is access." "Fortune," she said softly, "is the bus arriving on time. It is also policy." He held up a small envelope. "The last batch of back paychecks," he said. "I thought you might want to hand your mother hers. It feels better from you." She took the envelope. Their fingers did not touch. Behind them at the bar, a young couple laughed too loud, and a server navigated the perimeter with the perfect balance of a tray. The city beyond was still a scintillated grid of other people's stories. Inside, the air carried a new smell, not lilies or lemon, but paper and ink and the faint metallic scent of coins being counted with care. Lena pulled out her $4 and placed them on the counter by the host's stand. "For the staff coffee fund," she said when the host looked confused. "Call it a habit." Adrian watched the small ritual, the way a cheap object in a rich room could become a declaration. He found that he could breathe a little easier around it. "We don't bow," she said, "mostly to the bills, partly to the past." "We don't break," he nodded. "We do the work," he said. "No romance," she added dryly. He smiled, not offended. "No romance," he agreed. "Just the truth. If you're still here, you felt it. The slow burn of dignity set against the clean, hard shine of money. You watched a girl hold on to $4 like it was her name and walk into a room that was not made for her. You saw a man stop letting his last name be a barrier to his vision. There was humiliation. There was defiance. There was a reluctant alliance that turned into a different kind of partnership, the kind built on data and sweeping floors, on the invisible engine and the gilded cage named aloud. And in the end, the cheap object was not a prop. It was a promise. $4 placed on a counter to say, "I can be here without owing you anything. We can meet eye to eye. If this story made you feel something, share it with someone who knows what it is to count minutes and keep their head high. Subscribe for more quiet revolutions, more rooms where truth arrives with the staff through the service door and slowly, beautifully changes the air."